Chapter 17. Glenmarker's Confession, Tape. Cynthia and I, long before the riot started, had a good laugh when we were served the martinis by our unknown admirer, but neither of us were reluctant to take them. We thanked the waitress, and then turned to watch where she went next. For the moment it did us little good, because she simply went back to the bar and waited around for another order. "I think it would be funny," grinned Cynthia. "You're having a joke you're not letting me in on." "I was just thinking, if it was some Les who sent the drinks over, what fun it would be to let her come over to the table, and after a time she'd start groping you. What a surprise!" And she laughed harder. "What makes you think it would be a Les?" "None of the boys in here would go for you or me, only other boys. After all, darling, we are two very beautiful girls. Soft and cuddly and all that sort of thing." Glinda kept her eyes on the waitress for a long time, and saw the skinny girl in red ordering martini after martini. Several times, Glinda was sure the girl in red was looking across to them, but she waited some time before she mentioned it. "You think so?" smiled Cynthia, trying to look out of the corner of her eye. "She keeps looking in this direction." "I can't get a good look at her." "Don't bother. It's about the ugliest drag I've seen in all my life." "You sure it's a drag?" "As sure as I've ever been about anything." "What in hell would another drag want with a couple of dolls like us?" Cynthia tried to brush the thought out of her mind. "Maybe he's double-gated. Then again, perhaps he's just another transvestite like I am, looking for a score." "No matter what, at least we got a free drink out of him. We just don't pay any attention." She sipped of her martini. But it bothered Glinda. Something about the drag in red gave her a creepy feeling in her stomach. Glinda didn't like the feeling. She wanted to get up from the table and confront the little bastard, then jam her fist into his ugly face. But what the hell? "I suppose he's got as much a right to look around for a score as anyone else," she said silently, then saluted Cynthia with the glass and also drank. Glinda tried to shake the creature from her mind with the thought, but it didn't work that way. A creepy stomach was hard to shake, and a creepy stomach didn't come unless there was some cause for it. The way Cynthia had felt something wrong on the strip outside was the same way Glinda felt about the girl in red, who continually sneaked her looks at them. She had felt the same feelings many times when she was with the Syndicate, and there the creepy stomach took a deep turn. It was the same feeling she had had when she watched the Syndicate at work all those years she had been with it. She couldn't believe her own thoughts, that they could be on to her, they could know where she had gone, but she couldn't dismiss that feeling in her stomach so easily. It was there, and it was that power of disaster. Ultimate, pending disaster. "Let's get out of here, Cynthia." "In a little while. I still have that feeling about out there on the strip." "Well, I have a little feeling about being in here right now, love." She looked at her strangely. "Do you smell cop?" "I don't know what I smell, but whatever it is, I don't like it one damn bit. If you don't want to go out on the strip, is there a back door we can get out of?" Her eyes narrowed. "Are you in some kind of trouble?" "Whatever it is, I don't want you getting mixed up in it. Let's just get out of here." Before either of them could stand up, the first blast of many sirens crisscrossed on sound waves across the room. The sound snapped them momentarily back into their seats. Their eyes raced toward the front door, which Denny had thrown open. Then, just as quickly, he closed it, threw on the lock, and put an iron bar into place as extra security. He looked to the half-empty interior. "Don't nobody get excited. It looks like the strip is another Watts," he shouted. The information sent a shudder through everyone in the place, and many of the queens went into panic. Denny held up his hand again for their silence and to give his orders. "Now you're plenty safe in here if you don't go out on the street. But if you want to leave, take it easy and go out the back way. Go across the parking lot and down the hill. Just do yourself a favor and keep off the strip proper. They've gone mad out there, all up and down the street." He then raced behind the bar and poured himself a stiff jolt, looked to the door, where it appeared someone was trying to force their way in, then jolted himself again with a double shot. "Do we go or stay?" asked Cynthia, a bit of panic beginning to show in her face. "We go." I indicated the back. "Out the back way, like the man said." "We'll have to hit the strip sooner or later to get to my place. I'm right in the middle of it." "Not tonight, we won't. We'll grab the first cab we can find on one of the other streets and get as far away from here as we can go with the cash you have in your purse. My wallet is back at your place." "I've got enough." Glinda lost most of her feminine traits as she took hold of Cynthia's arm and raced with her to the back door, which was situated in a small hallway between the men's and ladies' can. Cool air rushed into their faces, along with the smell of burning rubber. The mob had set fire to the bus and an overturned car, which they could see in the alleyway between Denny's place and the next building. Glinda didn't permit much of a look. She hustled Cynthia across the parking lot, and the first bullet tore up the grass just at the edge of the parking lot. Cynthia stopped dead in her tracks and twisted her head back toward the bar. "That was a shot!" "Just keep moving!" screamed Glinda in a higher-pitched tone than she had mustered since her high school days. "But somebody's shooting at us!" "Good Christ, do as I tell you!" Glinda had seen the skinny tramp in red racing across the parking lot after them. Glinda twisted Cynthia's arm violently, and the girl flew off balance. She toppled down the steep, grassy incline, and in the move, she shot out with her arm and grabbed Glinda's sweater front. They both rolled head over heels down the slope, and only came to a stop when they had found the bottom. Glinda didn't wait for any explanations. She lifted Cynthia to her feet and pushed her toward a car which was parked on the side of the street. The second bullet tore into the hood of the car just as they ducked down behind it. "Somebody is shooting at us!" "And don't I know it? Keep your head down." "Why are we being singled out?" Cynthia found the first dark tears of hysteria flooding her eyes. "We aren't being singled out. I am. You're in it only because they've caught up with me while you're along." "They? They who?" "The Syndicate, damn it!" "What has the Syndicate got to do with you?" "I broke with them earlier this year. They've been after me all the time. Damn. I should have known they'd use a drag to search me out. I've been stupid. For the first time in my life, I've played it stupid. Where else would they look for me but in a gay bar? Who else would they send after me but another drag? What's one more drag in a drag bar?" The next shot tore through the pink angora and into Glinda's left shoulder. The blood splattered up and down her front and onto the front fender of the automobile, their protection. The shock of the slug spun Glinda into the street, but all the reflexes were still there. Glinda spun to the protection. Cynthia screamed once, then jammed her fist into her own mouth to keep from screaming again. The pain was violent in Glinda's shoulder, but she fought stiffly to keep her senses. She lowered her head behind the hood again and sneaked a look around the front of the car. The killer in the red dress stood out in the open, just a few yards in front of us. There was no hiding from the killer. He knew his opponents had no weapons. "He only wants me," Glinda spoke in a low whisper. Cynthia didn't take her fist from her mouth, but she whimpered. "Don't leave me. Oh, please don't leave me. I've got to do something, or we're both going to be killed. I've got to talk to him." Glinda leaned partially around the hood of the car and called, "You! Can we talk?" Glinda snapped her head around the hood again, just as a piece of searing lead took off a headlight. "You only want me, fella. Why don't you let the girl go? She doesn't even know what you look like."
"Go ahead. Beg. I like that."
"I'll do anything you want. Just let the girl go. The Syndicate don't want her. They only want me."
"Pretty little thing, so you've always thought. You know, when I was coming up in the ranks of the Syndicate, I looked at you as my kind of idol. I never thought I'd see my idol on his knees."
"I'll get on my knees for you. Just let the girl go."
"Back in the bar, I was thinking how beautiful you are and how ugly I am. I got to thinking how there isn't a drag in the world that wants to die naked, where he can see and show the rest of the world how he's only a male in female clothes. I think that's about the most horrible death any of us, our kind, could think of. You're not going to die with your clothes on, Glinda. You're going to die naked as a J-boyd. And if you've ruined that pink sweater, I'm gonna give you slugs in both eyes. The fates have been kind to me tonight, putting you and me in the same place at the same time, and with a riot to cover for me. It gives me the opportunity to finish you off the way I want. You were always the love of the underworld. I was nothing. I'll be pretty when you die."
Glinda's throat went dry. She knew the score. She had never expected to die as the male she had come into the world. Perhaps the clothing would have only been an illusion, but it would have been the way she wanted it. The killer knew how to torture, and it looked like there was nothing she could do about it. "Let the girl go. I'll come out. I'll make it easy for you. Easy all the way. Anything you want." "He'll kill you," Cynthia cried. "He's got us in a spot. Who knows? Maybe I'll get the breaks." Glinda reached over and kissed Cynthia swiftly. As soon as I tell you, you beat it off down the road. That's only a .25 pistol he's got. It's only good at close range. When I tell you to run, you goddamned well run. And take those high heels off now. You only have to make it 10 or 12 steps and you'll be out of range. Head for the Strip. He'll never find you in that mess up there. The Strip may turn out to be the safest place on Earth for you tonight. Now, you got it straight?
Coming out, bright eyes?
The killer was becoming impatient. Glinda knew she didn't have much time to make a decision. I don't want to leave you. You've got to, Cynthia. That's a killer out there. I'll get the police. I'll send them back. Fine, you do that. Glinda knew it would be too late, but Cynthia was so near panic she didn't want to worry her any further. You get up there and get the cops back here. Cynthia kicked off her shoes and prepared herself at the rear end of the car as Glinda had told her. Now don't take off until I shout at you to run. I've got to cover for you to give you that extra moment or two. Cynthia nodded her head. She couldn't speak. The tears were closing off her voice. Good girl, Glinda whispered. Then loudly, I'm coming out. Just leave the girl alone. Glinda stood up. For a moment, she thought about raising her hands, but what the hell good would that do? The killer had a slug for her no matter what she did.
Just move forward slowly, nice and easy. I want to watch you undress. Then I want to watch you die. You want your girlfriend to get out of this? You do just like you're told.
Glinda moved forward slowly. She caught a last glimpse of Cynthia crouched by the rear wheel, and she knew the girl was ready. And she knew Cynthia would take her orders. When she would shout to her, Cynthia would run. She had to shout that order at precisely the right moment. Glinda knew the killer had no intentions of letting the girl go free. It had to be Glinda who made the move which would give Cynthia the chance. Glinda stopped 2 feet from the ugly killer, who smiled until the wet saliva of lust drooled at the corners of his lips. Somewhere during the run, the killer had lost his wig, and without it, he was more ugly than ever.
You got a good look?
I got a good look.
And what do you see, my pretty?
I don't think you want to hear.
Take the sweater off.
Glinda slipped the sweater up over her head and held it in her hands. She wore no slip, but the brassiere with its rubber padding stood out beautifully in the half-light.
I even thought of putting a knife between you two falsies. I don't think I'll do that. I'd have to get too close to you. We can't take any chances like that, can we? You do have pretty titties, though, even if they are falsies. Another time, I could really go for you.
Get it over with.
Your girl still back there?
You didn't see her go, did you?
I wonder if she is really a girl. The killer lifted his voice. You hear that back there? I wonder if you are a real girl. Maybe our boy up here is double-gated, he laughed. I asked you what you saw.
Glinda narrowed her eyes hard. It was now or never. She had to make the first move count. I see a no-good son of a bitch that wouldn't make a good wart on a homosexual's belly. Glinda had almost been too late. At the same time the gun spoke and the bullet drove itself into a small space just below her heart, Glinda screamed, "Run, Cindy!" and threw the pink Angora sweater directly into the creep's face. But the killer automatically spun toward the racing footsteps, and although blinded by the sweater, which momentarily covered his face, he fired 2 quick shots. There was no time to think of pain or anything else. Glinda flew forward. The bullet sound just under her heart tore open even wider by the sudden force against it, but she hit the mark. Glinda was no longer Glinda. The wound tore open. The wig flew from my head. I was all-powerful. There was no force on Earth which could keep me from my attack. The startled killer let out 1 quick scream and went to the ground under my pure dead weight. My fist smashed out, and I felt the teeth break in the sudden rawness as my knuckles tore open. I felt the gun butt or barrel, I couldn't distinguish which, slam into the side of my neck, and I saw the stars of the sky all in one glorious blast. But my hand locked over the gun, and it couldn't fire. My other hand, bloody with my life's blood, clenched around the gun wrist like a vice. It seemed an eternity until my bleary eyes could see the small pistol turning, ever turning, until the barrel was firmly against the killer's chin. The killer had time for only 1 scream, and even that was chopped off in the middle as the gun spoke, to blow the man's jaw through the top of his head. I saw the man's last breath rush out of what had once been his throat in a great bubble of blood. Then I rolled over, off the dead man in the red drag, and I let the cool grass melt into my back. I hurt more than I had ever hurt in all my life. There didn't seem to be a spot on my whole body which didn't burn with all the fires of hell. And hell caused me to wonder, was that where I was going? A lot of the figures of my own victims crossed my vision. Then, for a long moment, everything went black. But the blood in my mouth, sticky sweet, brought me back to consciousness again. My eyes looked up to the dark heavens where the stars twinkled. Some of the smoke from burning buildings and cars on the strip crossed the sky high above me, but I could see the stars. There didn't seem to be anything which could blot the stars from my view just then. They were there, and they were bright. Another spasm sent the blood rushing from my wounds and up through my mouth. I couldn't move any longer, not even my arms or my hands. Such simple little movements I had done all my life. There were none, and I knew that I'd had it. I felt the end was close, but I fought for every precious second of it. There was no longer movement, and there was no longer any voice I could command. Only the sounds of violence somewhere, a long way from me. Only the sounds of violence, which should have comforted me in my dying moments. I had lived by and with violence all my life. Strange it would be such a violence that I would hear in the last seconds. It was as if it were violence that was singing my swan song. It was violence that had come from nowhere to see me off, to bid me adieu, to exit me from the only world I had ever known. Everything suddenly seemed so silly to me, the whole scheme of things. I wanted to laugh, but I couldn't focus my senses to even that privilege. I was not to be permitted even that last movement toward fate. But I did realize I was still in drag. I would die in the clothes I had always hoped for. I only wished I could reach the Angora sweater and the wig, but I had outwitted the killer. The killer was not to see me die with or without the clothes of my choice. It was the one glowing thought. Then I heard Cynthia scream, and I knew she had returned. Perhaps Cynthia would see I was buried as I would have wanted. There was plenty of money for such a thing in my wallet back at her apartment. What a strange thought, I realized, as the blackness closed in.
Chapter 18. Epilogue to Fate.
Glinda had long since slipped into pink nylon panties, brassiere, and slip. Over it, she wore a brown skirt, frilly white blouse, and a brown cashmere cardigan sweater. Even the brown high-heeled shoes fitted comfortably. And as she finished her story, she put a cigarette between her freshly painted lips and waited for Charlie to light it. She took the burning cigarette from her lips, and her eyes grew bright at seeing the smear of fresh lipstick on the end. Such a small thing, but so powerful in its meaning during those last few minutes. There was the sexual lust she had always felt, but which Glinda had been denied for so many months. Yet there was nothing to be done for release. She wanted a full-length mirror. There was none. She leaned back on the cot with a feeling of great relief creeping over her entire body. She hugged her arms tightly around her, her fingers digging deep into the soft pile of the sweater. Her eyes fluttered rapidly, girlishly, as she looked across to the slowly spinning tape recorder, then on to Charlie, and finally to myself as I leaned against the holding cell bars, my arms folded. This really is the only thing I regret having to leave. The feeling of it all. Glinda stroked the soft wool lovingly. She looked back to Charlie. Your daughter has excellent taste, Uncle Charlie. Tell her so for me. Tell her, from the skin out, she has excellent taste. Charlie nodded. Glinda came forward on the cot. So the record has spun its measured spin. The story is told. The Sunset Strip fuzz sped me to a hospital, where I eventually came around. My fingerprints, taken as strictly routine while I was unconscious, were checked out, and I was found to be wanted back here. One thing led to another, and here I am, and here I end. Glinda took her hands from caressing the soft sweater long enough to shrug her narrow shoulders. That's about the whole story as I lived it. I was puzzled.
But you committed no crime on the coast. Why the secrecy all this time about your moves?
Glinda laughed her musical laugh. She indicated her lovely clothing. I wonder if I would have gotten these things if I had no story to tell. This time, her cigarette was crushed out on the cement floor by the pointed toe of her high-heeled shoe. But, Warden, you should be able to see now why it is so important to a transvestite not to leave this world in male attire. It's our religion, so to speak. Maybe we live a lie, but also, perhaps in death, we have come to a truth. Are you sorry we made our bargain? I left my position at the bars, then crossed to turn off the tape recorder. Finally, I looked back to the beautiful Glinda. A bargain is a bargain. I always keep my word. Then I slammed my fist into an open palm. Damn. I look at you, and I see a vision of loveliness who could have done so much with your talents. I have little doubt but that you could have made it big on the stage, maybe even the movies. Certainly, a fine-looking girl as you present, you'd have made it as a girl in any walk of life you desired. Glinda grinned. I did, Warden. I did make it as a girl, in the profession of my choice, and I made it big. I looked around the bleak cell. Sure you did. Right into the big house. Charlie the guard looked to his wristwatch, then nudged me as he again indicated his watch. Glinda caught the action and knew. A strange sensation of loneliness crept swiftly through her body, a sudden realization of the finality in her situation. Even so long ago, laying on the ground with bullet holes exposing the inside of her body to the elements, there had been only a feeling of deep relaxation. There had been no feeling of finality, nothing like that which she experienced in those last moments. The exactness of the end came in an overpowering cloak of fear which shook her entire frame. She hugged her arms tighter around her body again, only this time it was for more than the feel of the female softness. She fought down the shakes, which were nearly uncontrollable. She didn't want the shakes. She didn't want any of us to see she had any fear. She had watched so many others tremble at the sight of her gun. She didn't want anyone to think she could not take what she dished out. Glinda spoke softly, in an attempt to hide her trembling tones. About that time? I closed and locked the lid of the tape recorder. 7 minutes. 7 minutes to eternity. Glinda didn't even want to think about it, let alone say the words, but they had come out through slack lips. The people you took never had 7 minutes to think about anything. It had been the first hard words I uttered throughout the entire interview. But they never knew, until the last second. It's better that way, not knowing. Knowing the precise moment, the waiting, that's the real punishment in a thing like this. I lifted the tape recorder and handed it to a uniformed guard who put it on the floor outside of the cell. There is still time if you want to see the Padre. I'm wearing my religion, she said softly. Then, as an afterthought, she let one hand drift to the spot on her head which had been shaved. I hate to have my public see me with this. Always before I've had the most beautiful wigs. She looked at me and tried for a weak smile. Forgive me for looking backward, Warden, but since it appears I have so little future, I can only remember what was in the past. Feel it as you see best, Glenn. Please, Glinda. She made the appropriate gesture. Yes, Glinda. Glinda let her hands once more caress along the smooth lines of her brown skirt. Well, are there any more preparations? We want everything to go off just as it should. I shook my head, and Glinda got that sinking look again. Momentarily, she thought her legs would buckle beneath her. She braced the back of her legs against the cot for added support. It was of little help against the dizziness which swam in her head and blurred her eyes. Will you need help? Glinda forced a partial clearing to her eyes as she looked at me. There was no doubt then about the trembling in her voice. No, I'll be all right. There are times a lady must walk unaided. Just give me a minute and I'll be all right. Time is running out. If you have to be helped... I made a sign with my hand, and one of the uniformed guards started through the cell doors. There are no more minutes. I was firm. It was evident Glinda had no intentions of being aided by anyone for the last short walk of her life. There would be the witnesses, and there would be representatives of the press. They would not print Glinda Satin/Glenn Marker had to be carried to the chair. That was something none of them were going to get the chance to print. And the thought seemed to give her renewed strength. The power returned to her legs. Suddenly, the high heels were firm under her feet again. The strength steadily grew throughout her body until she stood straight and tall. Once more, she flounced up the frills on her blouse and again straightened the sweater over the skirt top. The guard had stopped in the cell doorway. She would now be a lady all the way and prove it. The press would remember her for a long time to come. Glinda walked out of the cell, unaided, to take her place in the center position of 4 uniformed guards. I took up my place at the head of the column, and Charlie fell to the rear. We stepped off at an extremely slow pace, our steps steadily moving toward a green steel door. One of the reporters in the witness stand watched the beautiful, short-haired girl mince her way toward the seat of destruction. He wanted to whistle, but instead turned to a fellow reporter. "I thought it was a guy they were strapping in." The end. Other books by Ed Wood include Hollywood Rat Race and Killer in Drag.